In the ocean, there is a very simple hierarchy. There are things that get eaten, and there is the killer whale. They hunt seals, they drown other whales. They have been documented flipping great white sharks upside down and removing the liver with what can only be described as surgical enthusiasm. The orca is, by every biological definition, an apex predator. Nothing hunts them, nothing challenges them, nothing even really tries. At least, that is what we are told. Because off the coast of Iceland, researchers listening in on a pod of killer whales in the middle of a herring hunt watched the whole thing fall apart. 1 minute, the orcas were feeding. The next, the entire pod went silent, dropped what they were doing, and left. Not casually, not with dignity. They took off. And the animal that did that to them is not a shark. It is not some prehistoric monster from the deep. Compared to a full-grown bull orca, it is honestly kind of small. It is a pilot whale, a rounded, glossy black, permanently mildly annoyed-looking blob of blubber whose main career is eating squid. And this was not a one-time thing. It happened the next summer, and the summer after that. In the Strait of Gibraltar, researchers logged these encounters across more than a decade, and in every single recorded interaction, the pilot whales chased and the killer whales left. Off Western Australia, more than 100 pilot whales once showed up mid-hunt and made a pod of orcas abandon their prey entirely. So the question is obvious. Why does the most successful predator in the history of the ocean consistently refuse to fight an animal it could take apart? The answer is not that orcas are cowards. The answer, it turns out, is math. And once you see it, the whole food pyramid you learned in school starts looking a little suspicious. Chapter 1. Tale of the Tape. Let us put them side by side. Killer whale, largest member of the dolphin family. The males in Iceland run around 23 feet and 6 or 7 tons. Elsewhere in the world, they get bigger. Teeth built for grabbing and tearing. Black and white paint job that reads as a threat from about a mile away. Pilot whale. Also a dolphin, despite the name. And it clearly did not get the memo about looking dangerous. Deep uniform black. A big, rounded forehead called a melon that gives it the permanent expression of a man about to complain about where you parked. A large male, long-finned pilot whale might reach 4 tons, but most are considerably lighter. Their teeth are few and blunt because they do not grab their food. They suck it in. Their entire mouth is built for ram and suck feeding on squid. So the matchup is Shaquille O'Neal versus your accountant. On paper, the orca should be able to sit on this animal and win. And to be fair to the orca, it is not just bigger. This is an animal that has independently invented dozens of hunting techniques across the planet. Some populations create waves to wash seals off ice floes, which is essentially teamwork with malice. Others deliberately beach themselves to grab sea lions and then wriggle back into the surf like a pool float that has decided it is a predator. These are learned, taught from mother to calf, and they differ from population to population. Hold on to that last point. It is the twist in this whole story. Meanwhile, the pilot whale's specialty is going deep. They spend most of their time near the surface, but for food, they drop to around 2,000 feet, hunting squid in the dark on a single breath for 10 to 16 minutes at a time. And here is the strange part. Most deep-diving animals conserve oxygen by moving slowly and carefully. Pilot whales do the opposite. Down at depth, they hit these bursts of high speed, swimming to run down fast prey. It is such an unusual strategy that researchers have nicknamed them the cheetahs of the deep sea. So they are not slow. They look like blobs, but they are extremely fit blobs. Still, being fast does not make you a threat to a 7-ton apex predator, unless you are not alone. Chapter 2. The Numbers Problem. Orcas hunt in pods. This is the thing they are famous for. It is how a pod can take down animals that a single orca could never handle alone. But orca pods have a ceiling. 8 is common. 20 is a big group. Pilot whales do not have pods. They have clans. They live in close-knit family units of 10 to 20, and those units join together into schools that can number in the hundreds. In the North Atlantic, finding 100 pilot whales traveling as one unit is not remarkable. It is a Tuesday. And these bonds are absurdly strong. Pilot whales have been observed diving and even breathing in synchrony, sometimes less than one body length apart, staying coordinated all the way down on deep foraging dives. This is a species that stays glued together under conditions where staying together actually costs them energy. So when a pod of 8 orcas meets a school of 100 pilot whales, the arithmetic changes. Shark is still shark, but shark is now surrounded by 60 accountants, and the accountants are not leaving. Now here is where it gets genuinely weird. When pilot whales hear killer whale calls, they do not hide. Every other reasonable animal in the sea hides. They swim toward the sound. Researchers ran this as an actual experiment, playing recordings through underwater speakers. Killer whale calls went out, and the pilot whales gathered into bigger groups and headed straight for the speaker. Scientists call this attraction to predator calls. It sounds like a suicide mission. It is actually a very old and very effective defense. Chapter 3. The Wall of Blubber. The strategy is called mobbing, and once you know the name, you see it everywhere in nature. Small birds swarm a hawk near their nests and shriek at it until it gives up out of pure exhaustion. Meerkats kick sand at snakes. Crows will follow an eagle across an entire valley for no reason other than to ruin its afternoon. The logic is beautiful. A predator's single greatest asset is surprise. It needs to arrive unseen and strike before anyone reacts. Mobbing deletes that asset instantly. By charging in loudly and visibly, the group announces that it has been seen, that it is not confused, and that whatever happens next is going to be expensive. Most predators, being practical animals, decide to be somewhere else. So instead of being hunted, the pilot whales become the ones doing the hunting. They form a wall of muscle and blubber and drive it straight into the orcas. Observers describe the resulting chase as one of the great sights of the North Atlantic. Both species porpoising, breaking the surface again and again, running flat out. Except the casting is completely wrong. The round squid eaters are driving. The apex predator is leaving. Picture 8 orcas trying to hold a hunting formation while 60 high-speed pilot whales slam in from every direction, flanking them, cutting them off, and screaming the entire time. Remember Shaq and the accountants. Once there are 7 accountants per shack, the fight stops looking fair. And I am aware these analogies are getting strange, but stay with me, because the strangest part is still coming. Here it is. Despite the charging, the chasing, and the sheer chaos, these two species almost never actually touch each other. Nobody is bitten to death. There is no blood in the water. Whole encounters have been documented where the confrontation resolves without a single physical strike. The fight ends before it starts, and the leading explanation for why is genuinely one of the coolest things in marine biology. Chapter 4. Jamming the signal. If you took away an orca's eyesight, it would honestly be fine. Sound is what an orca actually runs on. Its echolocation is precise enough to identify prey by the shape of internal features like a fish's swim bladder. It finds food by listening. It coordinates the pod by calling. Down there, light quits after a few hundred feet, but sound travels for miles. Sound is not one of the orca's senses. Sound is the orca's entire operating system. And the pilot whale is one of the loudest, most talkative animals in the ocean. Studies show they are at their most vocal when socializing, and a mobbing event is about as social as it gets. So when 100 of them arrive and start yelling simultaneously, something interesting happens. The orcas can no longer hear each other. There is a leading hypothesis that this is not an accident. It is called acoustic jamming. The idea is that pilot whales flood the environment with complex overlapping calls, and in doing so, they effectively blind the orca's sonar, not damage it, just bury it in noise. An acoustic smokescreen. I want to be straight with you here, because this is exactly the point where nature documentaries usually start making things up. Nobody has directly measured how much a mobbing school degrades an orca's hunting. Acoustic jamming is a hypothesis, not a settled fact. But we know orcas depend almost totally on sound. We know pilot whales are extremely loud. And we know that when the noise arrives, the orcas leave. Those three facts sit together very comfortably. Which brings us to the obvious objection. Fine, it is loud, but you are an apex predator. Why not just stand your ground and push through the noise? Surely a group of adult killer whales is not getting bullied out of its own dinner by the ocean equivalent of a screaming school assembly. And the answer to that is the best part of this entire story. Chapter 5. The Apex Predator Paradox. There is a concept in predator ecology that flips everything you assume about being at the top. When you are the apex predator, you have the most to lose from a fight. Think about it from the other direction. A small, scrappy animal that gets a cut in a scuffle has an unpleasant week. It heals. It moves on. Its whole survival strategy already assumes it is going to take hits. An orca's survival strategy assumes the opposite. It assumes physical perfection. This is an animal that eats by outswimming and outmaneuvering fast prey in open water. A torn dorsal fin, a damaged flipper, a deep muscle injury from a 2-ton animal ramming into its side at speed. And suddenly, it cannot hunt properly. If it cannot hunt, it cannot feed itself. And an orca that cannot keep pace with its family is in serious trouble, because the North Atlantic does not do sympathy. So now, do the math the way an orca would. If the pod stands and fights a school of 100 pilot whales, they might win. They might also come out of it with an injury that costs one of them everything. It is a genuine gamble. And here is the part that seals it. What exactly are they gambling for? Chapter 6. There is no herring inside a pilot whale. This is the question almost nobody asks, and it cracks the whole thing open. Suppose the orcas stayed. Suppose they won. What is the prize? The killer whales of southern Iceland are fish specialists. They eat herring. Their entire way of life is built around chasing herring, herding them into tight bait balls and stunning them with strikes of the tail. Researchers photographed the individual whales involved in these encounters, and they were fish eaters. So there is no meal at the end of this fight, because these orcas do not eat pilot whales. There is no herring inside a pilot whale. There is no territory to win either, because the ocean does not come with fences. There is no ranking, no title, no other orcas hovering nearby, quietly impressed by your commitment. There is only the bill, injury risk, energy burned, and hours of hunting time lost while you argue with a mob of animals you cannot eat. Added up, real risk, real cost, and no apparent payoff. Under those conditions, leaving is not one option among several. Leaving is the correct answer, and leaving is what they do. Now, the honest caveat, because I do not want to oversell this. Everything I just walked you through is inference. It is a reading of the behavior, not testimony from the animals. Nobody has interviewed an orca about its priorities, and the published science on these encounters is deliberately modest. What it establishes is that the avoidance is real, that it repeats, and that both species respond to each other's calls. The reasoning about why is ours. But it is a strong case. It fits the diet data. It fits the acoustic experiments. It fits the fact that the avoidance is consistent instead of occasional. And it matches a pattern found absolutely everywhere else in nature. Lions abandon kills to hyena clans they could individually destroy. Bears yield to wolf packs. None of them are cowards. All of them are still alive. You do not win by fighting everything you could beat. You win by declining fights that pay nothing. Chapter 7. The map with holes in it. Here is where this stops being a fun animal fact and starts reshaping an entire ecosystem. Ecologists have a concept called the landscape of fear. The idea is that predators do not only affect prey by eating them, they affect prey by existing, because animals rearrange their whole lives around avoiding places where something dangerous might be. The strange thing here is that the killer whale, the animal that normally creates the landscape of fear, appears to be living inside somebody else's. If the pattern holds the way researchers have documented it, then across the North Atlantic there are effectively zones where pilot whale schools gather and orcas would rather not be. Not walls, not borders, just places where the cost of showing up is consistently higher than whatever is on the menu there. And that has consequences that go far beyond two species being annoyed with each other. Because when the orcas relocate, everything the orcas eat gets a break. The herring in that zone are safer. The seals are safer. A group of squid-eating blobs without ever intending to protect anything ends up creating a refuge for smaller animals purely by being too much trouble for the apex predator to deal with. The most powerful hunter in the history of the ocean effectively becomes a nomad, routing around confrontations with a smaller, louder, considerably more unhinged cousin. Which raises a fair question. If pilot whales can push out the apex predator, why is the pilot whale not the apex predator? Chapter 8. Why the orca still wins the title. The answer comes down to a simple rule in ecology. Apex status is about what you kill, not who you annoy. You cannot put a rat in a box with 20 ants, watch the ants win, and declare the ant an apex predator. That is not what the word means. Orcas are generalists, and they are arguably the most extreme generalists on Earth. Different populations have figured out how to take great white sharks off South Africa, bowhead whales in the Arctic, and stingrays in New Zealand. They live in every ocean on the planet, from the tropics to the polar ice, and they eat wildly different things depending on where they were raised. That is the real superpower, not the teeth, the culture. If conditions change, the orca changes. The pilot whale is a specialist. It is a squid-eating machine with a body optimized for deep sprints and a social system optimized for mobbing. Its dominance is local. In a head-on meeting in the North Atlantic, it wins on numbers and home field advantage, not on being the better predator. And that social system, the thing that makes them so formidable in a group, is also their single greatest weakness. Pilot whales are among the species most frequently involved in mass strandings. One leading explanation is exactly this bond. If one animal becomes sick or disoriented and heads into shallow water, the rest may follow rather than break the group. They are so committed to staying together that they will follow each other onto a beach. That is the trade. Unbreakable as a crowd, terrifyingly fragile as individuals. And in an actual one-on-one meeting with a bull orca, the pilot whale is not winning that. Chapter 9. The Cold War. So the orcas avoid. But orcas are not the kind of animal that simply accepts a situation forever. Remember the very first observation in this video. The pod did not just leave when the pilot whales showed up. First, they went completely silent. That detail is worth sitting with. In an animal whose entire life runs on constant acoustic chatter, going quiet is like switching off your headlights and hoping. It is what you do when you would strongly prefer not to be located. Whether that silence is a deliberate tactic or just a reaction to the chaos, nobody can say for certain. But it looks an awful lot like an animal trying not to be noticed. Meanwhile, the harassment does not stop when the danger does. The mobbing is not a quick warning and a parting of ways. Pilot whales will pursue and keep pursuing well past the point where anything is being defended. They are not trying to eat anybody, they are just making a point. And then there is the food thing. In the Bremer Canyon off Western Australia, more than 100 pilot whales arrived while orcas were hunting a beaked whale, and the orcas dropped the hunt and withdrew. The pilot whales did not eat it. They did not take anything. They just ended it. You spend hours setting up a meal, and something with a forehead like a cooking pot screams into the area and ruins it, then leaves without eating a bite. That is not competition. That is spite with a pulse. Chapter 10. The Calf. Nobody can explain. And then, just when this story could not get stranger, the orcas did something that nobody has been able to explain at all. The 23rd of June, 2022, off South Iceland. Researchers find a group of killer whales, mixed ages and sexes, traveling slowly, foraging, socializing, totally ordinary, except for one thing. Swimming among them is a newborn pilot whale. Not a juvenile, a neonate, days old, and in every direction out to the horizon, there is not another pilot whale in sight. No mother, no school, nothing. On the 20th of June, 2023, it happened again. Different orcas, different individuals. Another newborn pilot whale, alone in the middle of them. The obvious reading is that a predator took a calf. Except they were not eating it. The calf was seen surfacing directly in front of them, and at times swimming in echelon position, the spot a young whale normally takes beside its mother to ride the pressure wave and save energy. And at times, the orcas lifted it clean out of the water. They were carrying it. Photo identification confirmed that in both encounters, the orcas involved were, once again, likely fish-eating specialists. There were no clear signs of predation in either event. Researchers put forward 3 possibilities and were careful to say that all of them remain uncertain. It might be play, whether friendly or not, since orcas do interact with other species without killing them. It might be practice, young whales rehearsing the handling of prey they will never actually finish. or it might be epimelectic behavior, which is the technical term for caregiving. Whales have been recorded holding sick or dying members of their own kind at the surface for days. Play, practice, or something uncomfortably close to tenderness. And we will probably never know, for an almost annoyingly simple reason. In neither case did anyone see how it started or how it ended. The researchers arrived halfway through the story. Where the calf came from and what happened to it is unrecorded. Which I actually love, because scientists usually get accused of claiming more certainty than they have. Here the opposite happened. They wrote down exactly what they saw, listed every explanation they could think of, and then said plainly that the true motivation is unknown. Chapter 11. What happens next? So why have the orcas not evolved a counter-strategy? Honestly, probably because it has not been worth it. Avoidance is cheap, fighting is expensive. As long as there is open ocean and other food, walking away costs an orca almost nothing. But that calculation depends on there being somewhere else to go. As the Arctic warms and fish stocks shift north, the ranges of these two species are increasingly overlapping. The regular presence of pilot whales in Icelandic waters is a relatively recent development. Researchers noted them arriving, then watched them come back every summer since. We tend to picture the ocean as fixed, with territories settled long ago. It is not. Water temperatures move, fish move, and everything that eats those fish moves with them, showing up in places their ancestors rarely visited and meeting neighbors they were never built to live beside. Which means encounters that used to be occasional are becoming routine, and avoidance only works while there is room to avoid. Nobody knows what happens if that room runs out. Maybe orcas start figuring out how to split a school and pick off stragglers. Maybe pilot whales simply hold the line. Maybe the two species work out an arrangement the way they seem to have so far, all noise and no blood. But it is a real open question in marine biology right now, and the answer is being worked out in the North Atlantic while we sit here talking about it. Chapter 12. The pyramid was always a bit of a lie. Here is what I actually take away from all this. Apex predator is a human label. We love pyramids. We love the idea that there is one thing on top and everything else is arranged neatly underneath it. The ocean does not work like that. The killer whale is still the most capable predator alive. That has not changed. But being the most capable does not mean being the most powerful in every specific situation, in every specific patch of water, on every specific afternoon. It means you are extremely good at killing things. It does not mean you get to have a peaceful day. Because it turns out, you can be the undisputed champion of the entire ocean and still get run off your own dinner by 100 screaming squid eaters with foreheads like cooking pots, who are not stronger than you, not faster than you, and not even hungry. They are just committed, and they are extremely difficult to reason with. Chapter 13. Before you go. If this whole thing left you with more questions than answers, congratulations. You have arrived at exactly the same place as the scientists. Drop a like so this reaches other people who think about stuff like this at 2 in the morning, then go settle the argument in the comments. Is the pilot whale reaction an ancient inherited fear against a predator that stopped being a predator generations ago? Or is it a straight-up turf war over food? Pick a side and defend it, because researchers are still genuinely split. And if you want more of the strange, badly behaved, deeply unhinged corners of the natural world, subscribe and stick around. There is always something down there doing something nobody can explain yet. Thanks for watching.